Hello and good morning, class 9, Political Science, first chapter, Why is Democracy and Why Democracy? In our previous part, we had already discussed what is the meaning of democracy and what are the important features of democracy. And today, let us continue why democracy. So let's start. Argument in support of democracy. Point number 1. It is more accountable forms of government. Democracy is more accountable forms of government when we compare with a non-democratic forms of government, because democracy is better than any other forms of government in responding to the needs of the people. But in non-democratic government, it all depends on the wishes of the people who rule. And the rulers do not want to, and they don't have to act according to the wishes of the people. And point number 2 is it improves the quality of decision making, because democracy is based on consultation, deliberation and discussion, and democratic decision always involve many persons, discussions and meeting. When a number of people put their heads together, they are able to point out possible mistake in any decision. So, therefore, there is a big advantage in democracy. It reduces the chances of rash or irresponsible decision. Therefore, democracy improves the quality of decision making. And the third point of argument in support of democracy is it allows us to correct its own mistake. As we know, there is no guarantee that mistake cannot be made even in democracy. No forms of government can guarantee that. The advantage in democracy is that such mistake cannot be hidden for long. There is a space for public discussions on this mistake, and there is a room for corrections. And then the next argument in support of democracy is it is better than any other forms of government, because democracy enhances the dignity of the citizens. And the last one is it is considered the best forms of government when we compare with non-democratic forms of government. And then let us move to the next slide. As we see from the slide, argument against the democracy. So what are the demerits or disadvantages of democracy? Let us see. Point number 1 is demerits. Point number 1 of democracy is leader keep changing in democracy. This lead to instability. And point number 2 is democracy is all about political competitions and power play. There is no scope for morality. And so many people have to be consulted in democracy, that is it lead to, or it is bound to delay decision making process. And then the next point is elected leaders do not know the best interest of the people. It lead to bad decision. That is another disadvantage or demerit. And it is based on electoral competition, so it lead to corruptions. And last but not the least, the ordinary people do not know what is good for them, so they are unable to decide what is good and bad. And let us move on to the next slide. Broader meaning of democracy. So a representative democracy is one in which people elect their representative to the legislature. So the most common forms that democracy takes in our times is that of representative democracy. We have already discussed in the previous classes also. In the country we call democracy, all the people do not rule. A majority is allowed to take decision on behalf of all the people. Even the majority does not rule directly. The majority of people rules through their elected representative. This is necessary because representative forms or representative government is necessary because in modern democracies it involves a large number of people. that is physically impossible for them to come together and sit together and take a collective decision. Even if they could, the citizens do not have the time, the desire, or the skill to take part in all the decisions. So this gives us a clear but minimal understanding of democracy. This clarity helps us to distinguish democracy from non-democracy. Let us see what is the differences between democratic and dictatorship. And then, in democracy, power lies in the hands of the people. But in dictatorship, power lies in the hands of individuals. People has a right to choose the government through elections. But in dictatorship, people do not have a right to choose the government. Democracy, people enjoy freedom of speech and expression. In dictatorship, people do not have any right. All citizens is equals in the eyes of law in democracy, but there is no equality in dictatorship. Policies are made for the benefit of all the peoples in democracy, but in dictatorship, policies are made for the benefit of an individuals or selected groups of people. Now let us see two types of democracy. What is then? That is direct and indirect democracy. What is direct democracy? It is a political setup where people themselves participate directly and make the law directly and participate in the parliament directly in the functionings of the government. That is called direct democracy. Decisions are taken on the basis of the majority of the opinion. It is suitable for a geographically a small country with less population, like example ancient Greeks, Rome and India, and modern period that is still existed in Switzerland. Next slide. In indirect democracy, in the modern world, most of the countries are following the indirect democracy. Because as I mentioned the previous, in modern democracy, in modern society, there is a crores and lakhs of large numbers of peoples are there in the country, and it is impossible to come together and sit together and participate directly in the decision making process. It is a system in which the representatives are elected by the people, and this representative act on behalf of the people. They are so sensitive to cater the needs and opinions of the people. Example like India, France, USA. So for today, let us end our discussion for this chapter. So enjoy these lectures and have a good day.